Comment giving my story. A rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The morning sun beat down on the hot asphalt of Atlantic City, New Jersey, as Remia woke up under the awning of Tony's diner, her little fingers clutching the piece of cardboard that served as her pillow. At 4 years old, she had learned that mornings were the best time to get a few coins from the workers hurrying to their jobs. Her tangled, dirty brown hair partially covered a thin face marked by a determination that no child should need to have. Remia got up slowly, shaking the dust off the faded yellow dress she had been wearing for weeks. It was the only one she owned, a gift from a kind lady she had met months ago in Central Park. She carefully folded the cardboard and hid it behind a trash can, a morning ritual that had become automatic. She knew that if she left it in plain sight, another homeless person might take it away. The little girl walked through the still empty streets, her bare feet knowing every crack in the pavement. She passed the downtown church, where the priest used to give out bread in the morning to whoever arrived first. But today she was late. The line had already formed, and she knew that there would be nothing left for her. She sighed and headed towards the park, where she would wait for the first passers-by of the day. Remia's stomach rumbled softly as she positioned herself near the bus stop. She had learned that people were more generous when they were waiting for transportation, perhaps because they had time to really look at her. She held out her small, dirty hand, practicing the shy smile that sometimes softened the hearts of adults. That's when she heard the screams. Desperate sounds echoed from across town, coming from the direction of the small regional airport. Remia knew that place well. It was where she could sometimes find soda cans left by passengers. But she had never heard screams like that, filled with terror and despair. Without thinking twice, the little girl abandoned her position at the bus stop and ran towards the sounds. Her little feet pounded on the asphalt at an accelerated pace, her heart racing not only from the physical exertion, but from a strange intuition that something very serious was happening. The airport was almost 2 miles from downtown, but Remia was used to traveling long distances. During the run, she passed places she knew well. The auto repair shop where she could sometimes get water, the small grocery store whose owner occasionally gave her overripe fruit, the school where she would watch the other children playing at recess. When she arrived at the airport, what she saw paralyzed her with horror. An elegant-looking man, wearing a dark suit even in the morning heat, was tied with thick ropes to the landing gear of a small white plane. He was screaming desperately, struggling against the restraints that held him to the aircraft. His words were punctuated by panic, but Remia was able to understand fragments. "Please, I have a family. Don't do this. I didn't do anything." Near the plane, a younger man with dark hair and a face marked by anguish was making the final preparations for takeoff. His hands were shaking as he checked the instruments, and Remia could see tears running down his face. He was also shouting, but his words were different. "You have to tell me where she is. My sister disappeared because of you. If you don't talk, we're going up together." The scene was terrifying, but something in the younger man's voice touched Remia in a strange way. It wasn't the voice of someone evil, but of someone desperate, lost, suffering. She knew that kind of despair well. It was what she felt every night when she lay down on the street, wondering if she would see the sunrise. The plane's engine began to roar, and the tired man intensified his screams. The propeller spun faster and faster, creating a wind that made everyone's hair fly. Remia realized that in a few minutes the aircraft would take off, taking both men to a certain tragedy. No one else was present at the small airport. There were no security guards, no other people to help. It was just her, a 4-year-old girl, witnessing something that could end terribly. Remia looked around quickly, searching for anything she could do. Her small but observant eyes noticed that the pilot had left the cabin door ajar in his haste. A crazy idea began to form in her mind, an idea that any adult would consider impossible for a child her age. But Remia wasn't an ordinary child. Life on the streets had taught her to be brave when necessary, to act when everyone else hesitated. And something deep in her heart told her that she needed to do something, even if it was dangerous. The engine roared louder with each passing second. The bound man was now crying, his pleas mingling with the noise of the propeller. The pilot was about to accelerate for takeoff. It was now or never. Remia took a deep breath and ran towards the plane, her little legs carrying all the courage she could muster. The wind from the propeller almost knocked her down, but she persisted, climbing the side of the aircraft with the agility she had developed climbing walls and trees during her life on the streets. The pilot saw her at the last second, his eyes widening in surprise and horror as he realized that a child was trying to get on the plane. For a moment he hesitated, and it was this hesitation that Remia needed. With determination that surprised even herself, the girl managed to reach the control panel and, remembering something she had seen in a movie on a store's television, shut off the aircraft's engines. The sudden silence was deafening. The silence that followed the engine shutdown lasted only a few seconds, but it seemed like an eternity. Fabrizio Santana stared at the dirty, skinny girl who had just thwarted his desperate attempt, his dark brown eyes shining with tears of frustration and mixed relief. At 35, he was an experienced pilot, but at that moment, he seemed a man completely lost. "What did you do?" he muttered, his voice hoarse from shouting. His hands trembled as he watched Remia, who remained clinging to the control panel as if it were the most natural thing in the world for a 4-year-old to do. Remia stared back at him with her big, dark eyes, unafraid. Life on the streets had taught her to read people quickly, and she realized that despite his desperation, Fabrizio wasn't a bad person. "You were going to hurt him," she said simply, pointing to Oswaldo, who was still tied to the landing gear, gasping for breath and in shock. "He deserves it," Fabrizio exploded, punching the panel hard. "My sister disappeared because of him. Celia was working at his company and found things, bad things, and now she's gone." Oswaldo Medici finally managed to speak, his voice coming out in gasps due to the terror he had experienced. "I don't know what you're talking about. I've never hurt anyone." At 48, he was a handsome man with well-groomed grey hair and a posture that normally inspired confidence. But at that moment, tied up and vulnerable, he just looked like a scared man. Remia carefully climbed down from the plane and approached the two men. Her small, frail presence created a surreal contrast with the tension of the situation. "Why don't you talk to him instead of trying to hurt him?" she asked Fabrizio, her voice filled with a wisdom that shouldn't exist in someone so young. Fabrizio knelt down to her level, tears now flowing freely. "Because I've already tried to talk, little one. I've been to his company. I've searched everywhere. Celia disappeared 3 weeks ago, and no one wants to help me. The only thing I found out is that she was investigating irregularities in the construction of the new municipal school that his company is building." "What irregularities?" asked Oswaldo, genuinely confused. "Fabrizio, if your sister works for me, why didn't you come directly to me? I know all my employees. She said she couldn't trust you. That she discovered that you were overcharging for public works, using low-quality material and charging for expensive material. She had proof, documents." Fabrizio's voice broke. "And after she told me that, she simply disappeared." Oswaldo's face paled, not from guilt but from understanding. "Gonzales," he murmured, "the accountant. I suspected there was something wrong with his numbers, but I could never prove anything." Remia watched the conversation carefully, trying to understand the complicated words of the adults. But one thing was clear to her. Both men were suffering, each in their own way, and she knew suffering well. "Can I untie you?" she asked Oswaldo, already starting to fiddle with the ropes before even receiving an answer. Her small fingers, nimble due to the need for survival, began to work on the knots. Fabrizio made no move to stop her. The initial despair had given way to a deep exhaustion. "I'm sorry," he said to Oswaldo, his voice filled with regret. I didn't know what else to do. Celia's all I have in the world. Our parents died when we were little. It's always just been the two of us." Oswaldo, once freed from the ropes, massaged his bruised wrists. Surprisingly, there was no anger in his eyes, only sadness. "I understand the despair of a brother," he said softly. "If it were me, maybe I would have done the same thing." "Why do you understand?" asked Remia, her natural curiosity overcoming the tension of the moment. Oswaldo hesitated before answering, a flash of pain crossing his face. "Because I also lost someone important once. Someone I should have protected better." The morning in Atlantic City continued to be hot, but in the small airport, a strange atmosphere of mutual understanding had formed. Three completely different people, a successful businessman, a desperate pilot, and a street girl, united by circumstances that none of them had planned. "Let's look for your sister together," said Oswaldo finally, getting up and adjusting his wrinkled suit. "If Gonzales is involved in this, I need to know. And if he did something to Celia—" "Would you really help after what I tried to do to you?" asked Fabrizio, incredulous. "Injustice bothers me more than revenge," replied Oswaldo. "And besides—" He looked at Remia, who had sat on the ground and was watching them both with interest. "This little one has shown me that sometimes courage comes from the most unexpected places." Remia smiled for the first time that day, a shy but genuine smile. "I can help too," she said. "I know a lot of places in the city where people hide." Oswaldo felt something stir in his chest upon hearing that statement. There was something about the girl that touched him deeply, a mixture of vulnerability and strength that awakened in him protective instincts that he had tried to bury for years. "What's your name?" he asked, crouching down to get on her level. "Remia," she replied. "And you?" "I'm Oswaldo," he said, extending his hand to formally greet her. "And this is Fabrizio." "Nice to meet you," said Remia, shaking his hand with her small, dirty hand. The simple gesture carried a dignity that made Oswaldo's heart clench. Fabrizio watched the interaction, and for the first time in weeks, felt a glimmer of hope. "If we're going to look for Celia together, we need to start at the company. Gonzales may have left clues about where she is." "I agree," said Oswaldo. "But first—" He looked at Remia, who clearly hadn't eaten in hours. "Let's get some decent breakfast, and you, little one, need a bath and clean clothes." Remia frowned. "Why? I'm fine like this." "Because," said Oswaldo gently, "people who do brave things deserve to be treated with dignity." It was the first time in a long time that someone had spoken to Remia like that, as if she were important, as if she had value. Tears began to form in her eyes, but she held them back. Crying was something she had learned not to do in front of strangers. "You're not going to take me to the shelter, are you?" she asked, sudden fear tinging her voice. "No," promised Oswaldo immediately. "At least, not today. Today you're our partner in the search for Celia." And so, completely unexpectedly, an unlikely alliance was formed between a businessman tormented by secrets from the past, a pilot desperate for his missing sister, and a street girl who had just saved both their lives with her inexplicable courage. But none of the three could imagine that this was just the beginning of a journey that would reveal secrets much deeper than any of them was prepared to face. Oswaldo's house was in a quiet residential neighborhood of Atlantic City, a two-story building painted white with light blue trim, surrounded by a well-kept garden where red hibiscus and fragrant jasmine grew. For Remia, who had spent the last few months sleeping in awnings and parks, that house seemed like a palace. "Mirella," called Oswaldo as he opened the front door, his voice filled with special tenderness. "I brought some visitors." A 42-year-old woman appeared in the living room, her dark brown hair tied in a messy bun, and her green eyes slightly confused. Mirella was pretty, but there was something fragile in her expression, as if she were constantly trying to remember something important that she had forgotten. "Oswaldo," she said, blinking several times. "Did you leave this morning? I don't remember." "Did you go to work?" Oswaldo's heart ached, as it always did when Mirella's degenerative neurological condition manifested itself. In the last 2 years, she had begun to forget recent events with increasing frequency, although she retained older memories intact. "Yes, honey, but I came back early," he said patiently, reaching out to kiss her forehead gently. "And I brought some friends. This is Fabrizio, and this is Remia." Mirella looked at the pilot with polite courtesy, but when her eyes landed on Remia, something extraordinary happened. Her confused expression gradually transformed into surprise, then into something that resembled recognition, although mixed with uncertainty. "Remia," she murmured, crouching down to get on the girl's level. "What a pretty name! You remind me of someone." Remia watched the woman with curiosity. There was something familiar about Mirella's face, but she couldn't identify what it was. "Do you know me?" I'm not sure," said Mirella, running a hand through her hair. "Sometimes I have the feeling that I know people, but I can't remember from where." Oswaldo intervened gently. "Mirella has some memory problems," he explained to Fabrizio and Remia. "But she's the kindest person I've ever met." Fabrizio watched the interaction with respect, realizing the sensitivity of the situation. Remia, in turn, showed no signs of discomfort. In the life on the streets, she had learned that each person carried their own burdens. "You must be hungry," said Mirella to Remia, her maternal instinct working perfectly despite the memory problems. "I'm going to prepare something for you to eat." "You don't need to bother," said Remia politely, although her stomach rumbled audibly. "Of course I do," smiled Mirella. "A child always needs to eat well to grow strong." As Mirella headed to the kitchen, Oswaldo took the opportunity to show the house to the visitors. The living room was cozy, with comfortable furniture and family photographs scattered on the walls. Remia noticed that many of the photos showed Oswaldo and Mirella smiling, but there was an empty space on the wall where there seemed to have been a larger photo. "Can I use your bathroom to clean myself?" asked Remia, aware that she was too dirty for that clean environment. "Of course," said Oswaldo. "But how about a full bath? I'm sure Mirella can find some clothes for you." 20 minutes later, Remia emerged from the bathroom, transformed. Mirella had found a light blue dress that, although too big, looked adorable on the girl after being adjusted with a belt. Her brown hair, now clean and combed, revealed natural waves that framed her small face. "You look beautiful," said Mirella, clapping her hands with joy. "Now come eat." The kitchen table was set with care. Fresh bread, fruit, orange juice, and still steaming scrambled eggs. For Remia, who had spent days eating only scraps she could find, that meal seemed like a feast. "Slow down," advised Oswaldo gently when he saw how she devoured the food. "There's plenty for everyone." During the meal, Fabrizio told Mirella about Celia's disappearance. Oswaldo's wife listened carefully, although she occasionally seemed to get lost in the details. "Celia Santana," she repeated thoughtfully. "That name, does she work at Oswaldo's company?" "Used to," corrected Fabrizio. "She was a junior accountant, started about 6 months ago." "I don't remember her," said Mirella, frustrated. "Sorry, I should remember my husband's employees, but lately—" "Don't worry about it," said Oswaldo, holding her hand affectionately. "The important thing is that we help Fabrizio find her." "Do you really think this Gonzalez could have done something to her?" asked Mirella. "It's our main suspect," replied Oswaldo. "He's always been very controlling with the company's numbers, never letting anyone else touch the important files." Remia, who had finished eating and was now watching the adults talk, had a sudden memory. "I know a woman who used to give me food in Central Park," she said. "Black hair, pretty, always wore office clothes. She disappeared a few weeks ago." The 3 adults turned to her immediately. What did she look like? Asked Fabrizio, his voice tense with hope. About this tall, said Remia, raising her hand above her head. Dark eyes, always smiled at me. She brought sandwiches sometimes and said that I reminded her of the daughter she wanted to have one day. Fabrizio swallowed hard. That's Celia. She always wanted to have children. Where did you last see her? In the park, near the church. But it's been a long time since she's been there. A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. The confirmation that Celia had really disappeared made the situation even more real and urgent. We need to go to the company today, said Oswaldo, getting up. I'm going to confront Gonzalez personally. I'm going with you, said Fabrizio immediately. Me too, added Remia, surprising everyone. No, little one, said Oswaldo gently. It could be dangerous. But I can help, she insisted. I know how to observe things that adults don't notice. Mirella, who had observed the entire conversation, spoke up. Let her stay here with me, Oswaldo. We can get to know each other better. Oswaldo hesitated. There was something in Remia that awakened in him a powerful protective instinct, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. The idea of leaving her, even for a few hours, bothered him. Please, said Remia, looking at Mirella. I would like to stay with you. It's decided then, said Mirella, smiling. We're going to make cookies while you solve this company issue. Before leaving, Oswaldo knelt down in front of Remia. If anything happens, anything at all, you scream very loudly, okay? Okay, she promised. And Mirella, he turned to his wife, if you forget who she is, don't worry. Just be kind to her, as you always are with children. Mirella nodded, although a shadow of sadness crossed her face as she was reminded of her condition. After the men left, Mirella and Remia were alone in the kitchen. The older woman watched the girl with increasing curiosity. You know, she said thoughtfully, I have the strangest feeling that I've taken care of you before. Remia felt a shiver run down her spine. What do you mean? I can't explain it. It's like your little hands, the way you eat. Everything seems familiar to me. The two looked at each other in silence, both feeling that there was something important hovering between them, something that neither of them could fully identify. Have you ever lived in a shelter? Asked Mirella suddenly. Remia's heart raced. Yes, when I was younger. And there was a teacher there. A teacher who liked you very much? Remia's eyes widened. Fragmented memories began to emerge in her mind. A gentle woman who taught her to write her own name, who sang lullabies, who always had a warm hug on difficult days. Teacher Mirella, she whispered, her voice trembling. And at that moment, both knew that fate had woven between them a thread much more complex than either could have imagined. Tears streamed down Remia's face as fragments of memories returned like waves crashing on the beach. She remembered now Mirella's soft voice reading stories at bedtime, her gentle hands combing her hair, the comforting hugs when she cried, missing a family she had never known. You remember me, said Mirella, her own tears starting to flow. I knew there was something special about you, but my head, it doesn't let me remember right. You taught me how to write my name, sobbed Remia. And you always, essa menina mendiga de 4 anos, encontra milionário amarrado com corda, sendo prestes a ser arrastado por avião. Mas ela aparece atrás do piloto e faz algo terrível. Comente dando uma nota de 0 a 10 para a minha história. Sua opinião é muito importante. E se inscreva no meu canal para apoiar meu trabalho. Conto com sua ajuda. Comment giving my story. A rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. Adaptado para o contexto de comentários online em inglês. Texto. Adaptado. Said that I was special. That one day a family would truly love me. Mirella knelt down and hugged the girl tightly, as if wanting to protect her from all the suffering she had faced. I'm so sorry I forgot about you. The illness, it takes away pieces of me every day. But now we've found each other again, said Rimia, tightening the hug. It's like magic. Meanwhile, across town, Osvaldo and Fabrizio arrived at the construction company's office. The three-story building was in the business district, with a modern facade and gold plaques indicating Medici Construction, building dreams for 20 years. Gonzalez is on the second floor, explained Osvaldo as they climbed the stairs. He's always been very reserved, kind of suspicious of everyone. You never suspected him before? Asked Fabrizio. I suspected him a few times, yes. The numbers never quite added up, but he always had technical explanations that I couldn't argue with. Osvaldo paused. Besides, in the last 2 years, with Mirella's problems, I've been very absent from the company. They arrived at the accounting department and found González Pereira, a 52-year-old man, thin and nervous-looking, hunched over a pile of documents. When he saw Osvaldo enter, accompanied by Fabrizio, his face paled visibly. Mr. Medici, he said, trying to sound casual, I wasn't expecting you today. And who is your companion? This is Fabrizio Santana, brother of Celia Santana, who worked here until she disappeared 3 weeks ago. González swallowed hard. Ah, yes, Celia. It's a shame she resigned so abruptly, but you know how young people are these days, always looking for better opportunities. She didn't resign, said Fabrizio firmly. She disappeared. And before that, she had discovered irregularities in the municipal school contracts. Irregularities? What nonsense! All our contracts are absolutely legal. González nervously began to organize the papers on his desk. If she said something like that, she was clearly mistaken. Osvaldo watched the accountant's behavior carefully. González, I need to review all the documents for the school project. Now. Now? But Mr. Medici, that's very irregular. Normally you trust my work. Circumstances have changed, said Osvaldo dryly. The documents, please. With obvious reluctance, González opened a file and began to pull out folders. His hands trembled slightly as he handed the papers to Osvaldo. While the businessman examined the documents, Fabrizio noticed something strange. Why do you have a picture of my sister on your desk? He asked, pointing to a small photograph half hidden among the papers. González turned red. It's just a team photo, nothing more. It's a photo of just her, insisted Fabrizio, picking up the picture. Why would you keep a photo of just my sister? That's none of your business, exploded González, trying to grab the photo back. Osvaldo looked up from the documents, his expression becoming somber. These numbers are all wrong. Material costs are inflated by at least 40%. González, what's going on here? Before the accountant could respond, the office door opened and an elderly woman entered unceremoniously. Theodora Santos, 67, was a woman of rigid posture, impeccably styled white hair, and blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything and everyone with constant suspicion. Osvaldo, she said in an authoritative voice, we need to talk, immediately. Mrs. Santos, greeted Osvaldo respectfully. Now is not a good time. I'm resolving important company matters. That's exactly what I came to talk about. Theodora cast a disapproving glance at Fabrizio. I heard you brought a street child to my house. Your house? Repeated Osvaldo, a hint of irritation appearing in his voice. The house where my daughter lives, where my money pays the bills, retorted Theodora. And I won't allow you to expose Mirella to unnecessary dangers. Fabrizio watched the tension between mother-in-law and son-in-law with growing interest. There were clearly complex family issues involved. Rimia is not a danger to anyone, said Osvaldo firmly. She's just a child who needs help. A street child that you brought without knowing her history, her background, her possible diseases, listed Theodora. Mirella is in a fragile condition, and you expose her to this. Rimia's presence is doing Mirella good, defended Osvaldo. She seems more lucid, happier. For now, said Theodora dismissively. "But what if this girl decides to steal something? What if she brings other bums home? Have you thought about that?" Oswaldo's face turned red with anger. "Mrs. Santos, you're overstepping all the boundaries." "I'm protecting my family," she retorted. "Something you haven't been doing lately, spending time with strangers while your wife deteriorates at home." The accusation hit Oswaldo like a punch in the stomach. He knew that Theodora was being cruel, but there was a hint of truth in her words that hurt him deeply. Gonzalez took advantage of the distraction to try to discreetly put away some documents, but Fabrizio noticed him. "Hey, what are you hiding?" "Nothing, just organizing," murmured Gonzalez. "Let me see those papers," demanded Fabrizio, advancing towards the accountant. "No!" shouted Gonzalez, clutching the documents to his chest. "You have no authority here." The argument escalated quickly. Theodora continued to attack Oswaldo about his decisions. Fabrizio tried to take the papers from Gonzalez by force, and the accountant shouted for help. It was in the midst of this chaos that Oswaldo realized something crucial. On a nearby table, half hidden under other papers, was an envelope with handwriting that he immediately recognized. It was Celia's handwriting. "Gonzalez," he said in a dangerously calm voice, "where did that envelope come from?" The accountant followed Oswaldo's gaze and paled even more. I don't know what you're talking about." "That's my sister's handwriting," said Fabrizio, recognizing it too. "Where is she, Gonzalez? What did you do to her?" "I didn't do anything. She was threatening to expose things she didn't understand." "What things?" asked Oswaldo. Theodora, realizing that the situation was getting out of control, tried to intervene. "Oswaldo, don't get involved in this. Let the authorities handle it." "No," said Oswaldo with determination. "This is my responsibility. Gonzalez, you're going to tell me exactly what happened to Celia, or I'll call the authorities myself." Gonzalez looked around like a cornered animal. Sweat ran down his forehead as he calculated his options. "All right," he said finally, his voice coming out as a defeated whisper. "I'll tell you everything. But you're not going to like what you're going to hear." At that moment, as the three adults prepared to discover the truth about Celia, none of them knew that the answer would change not only the fate of the missing young woman, but also the future of everyone involved in that web of secrets and lies that had formed around Medici Construction. Gonzalez wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, his nervous eyes darting between Oswaldo, Fabrizio, and Theodora. The tense silence in the office was broken only by the ticking of the wall clock and the distant noise of traffic on the street. "Celia found out that I was adjusting some numbers on the contracts," he began, his voice trembling. "But it wasn't out of malice. I needed the extra money to pay my son's debts." "What kind of adjustments?" asked Oswaldo, although he already knew the answer. "Overbilling of materials, inflation of labor costs, some altered invoices." Gonzalez lowered his head. "Celia was very observant, very detail-oriented. She noticed the discrepancies when she was reviewing the files for the school project." Fabrizio clenched his fists. "And then you threatened her?" "I tried to talk to her first. I explained my situation. I asked her not to say anything. I even offered to split the profits." Gonzalez defended himself. "But she said she couldn't condone stealing public money." "So where is she?" exploded Fabrizio. She said she was going to report everything to you, Mr. Medici, and then to the authorities. I panicked." Gonzalez paused, swallowing with difficulty. "I told some people about her, people who didn't want the scheme to be discovered." "What people?" asked Oswaldo, his voice filled with a cold authority. "Suppliers who were involved in the overbilling. They have contacts. People who know how to make someone disappear for a while." Theodora, who had observed the entire confession in silence, finally spoke up. "Oswaldo, do you see the kind of problems your company is facing? And now you want to bring more complications home." "Where is my sister?" shouted Fabrizio, completely ignoring Theodora and grabbing Gonzalez by the shirt. "I don't know exactly. They just told me that she was in a safe place, that they were going to keep her quiet until things calmed down. You're saying my sister was kidnapped? Fabrizio's voice came out hoarse with despair. Not kidnapped, just kept away for a while. They promised they wouldn't hurt her. Oswaldo felt nausea rising. His company, built with so much effort over 20 years, was being used for crimes. Gonzales, you're going to give me the names of everyone involved, now. I can't. They'll kill me if they know I told you. And I'm going to kill you if you don't, said Fabrizio, with a coldness that even frightened Theodora. At that moment, Oswaldo's cell phone rang. It was a call from home. Mirella? He answered, worried. Oswaldo. Mirella's voice sounded confused. There's a little girl here at home. She says you brought her, but I don't remember. She's crying and I don't know what to do. Oswaldo's heart clenched. Mirella, honey. The girl's name is Remia. We talked about her this morning. She can stay there, okay? Remia, yes, now I remember a little, but she's very scared. She keeps asking if you're coming back. Tell her I'll be back soon. And Mirella, do you remember working at a shelter before? There was a long pause. Shelter? I have some images in my head, but it's all confusing. Don't worry. Take care of Remia, please. She's special. Theodora listened to the conversation, and her expression became even harsher. You see, Mirella is confused. The girl is bothering her. This is going to worsen my daughter's condition. Mrs. Santos, with all due respect, you don't understand the situation, said Oswaldo. I understand perfectly. You're neglecting your sick wife to play savior with a street girl, while your company is involved in scandals. The accusation hurt because there was a grain of truth in it. Oswaldo knew that he had distanced himself emotionally from Mirella since the illness manifested, not out of lack of love, but because he couldn't deal with the pain of seeing her deteriorating. Enough with the family argument, interrupted Fabrizio. Gonzales, you're going to take me where my sister is now. I don't know where she is. I just know she was taken out of town. Where to? Maybe to Trenton or Camden. They have contacts there. Oswaldo made a quick decision. We're going to look for her. Fabrizio, do you have any idea where she might be in those cities? Celia has a friend in Camden from her college days. She may have tried to get in touch. Theodora stood up abruptly. Oswaldo, if you leave now after that girl leaving Mirella alone with that strange child, I'm going to take action. What kind of action? I'm going to contact the family lawyer. Mirella is not in a position to make important decisions, and I, as her mother, have rights over my daughter's well-being. The threat was clear. Theodora was suggesting that she could legally question Mirella's ability to consent to Remia's presence in the house. You're blackmailing me, said Oswaldo, incredulous. I'm protecting my family, retorted Theodora. Something you should be doing. Fabrizio watched the family argument with growing frustration. Listen, you can resolve your personal issues later. Now I need to find my sister. He's right, said Oswaldo. Theodora, we'll talk about this when I get back. If you leave now, you may not find either the girl or Mirella when you return, threatened the mother-in-law. What do you mean by that? I mean that there are appropriate places for abandoned children, and there are appropriate places for people with mental problems. Oswaldo's blood ran cold. Theodora was threatening both Remia and Mirella. You wouldn't dare. I would dare, and I will dare if necessary. Mirella is my daughter, and I'm not going to let her be harmed by your irresponsibility. Gonzales, who had observed the entire discussion in silence, took advantage of the distraction to try to get up discreetly, but Fabrizio noticed him. You're not going anywhere, said the pilot, pushing the accountant back into the chair. You're going to stay here until we resolve this. I've already told you everything I know, protested Gonzales. You've told me half the story. I want names, places, contacts, everything. Oswaldo found himself divided between two equally urgent crises. On the one hand, Fabrizio needed his help to find Celia. On the other, Theodora was threatening to destroy the only good thing that had happened in his life in recent years, the connection between Mirella and Remia. "Fabrizio," he said finally, "I need to go home first. I need to make sure that Mirella and Remia are safe." "But what about my sister?" "We're going to find her, I promise. But I can't let two innocent people suffer in the meantime." Theodora smiled with satisfaction. Finally, a sensible decision. "Don't celebrate too soon, Mrs. Santos," said Oswaldo, with a firmness that she had rarely seen. "I'm going home, but not to do what you want. I'm going to protect Mirella and Remia from any threat, including you." Theodora's face contorted with anger. "How dare you talk to me like that? How dare I? Because I finally understood that you're not protecting Mirella, you're controlling her, and that's going to end now." Fabrizio sighed, realizing that he would have to wait a little longer to continue the search for Celia. "All right, let's resolve this at your house. But then, with or without you, I'm going to look for my sister." "It won't be without me," promised Oswaldo. "Gonzales, you're coming with us. And you're going to repeat everything you told us here to the right people. What if I refuse? Then you're going to personally explain to the authorities how a company employee disappeared after discovering your irregularities." As the four left the office towards Oswaldo's house, none of them could imagine that Remia, at that very moment, was making a discovery that would completely change the course of the entire investigation. While the adults argued in the office, Remia timidly explored Oswaldo and Mirella's house. The older woman had fallen asleep on the living room sofa after an episode of confusion where she forgot again who Remia was, leaving the girl alone and a little scared. Remia couldn't stay still. Life on the streets had taught her to always observe the environment, look for exits, understand the spaces. She walked through the rooms of the house, admiring the cleanliness, the beautiful furniture, the photographs on the walls that showed happy moments of a family that seemed very different from the current reality. It was when she arrived at Oswaldo's office that something caught her attention. Unlike the other rooms, that space had an air of sadness, as if it was avoided. There was a large desk with organized papers, bookshelves full of books, and on a side wall a series of photographs that seemed to tell a story. Remia climbed on a chair to see the photos better. They were images of Oswaldo and Mirella in happy moments, wedding, trips, celebrations, but there was a specific sequence that intrigued her. Photos where a dark-haired boy appeared, a wide smile, always clinging to his father or playing with his mother. "Who is this boy?" she murmured to herself, watching how the photos showed the boy growing over the years, until suddenly he simply disappeared from the sequence. The most recent photos showed only Oswaldo and Mirella, but both seemed different, less happy, as if a light had gone out. It was then that Remia noticed something strange. In one of the desk drawers there was a half-folded paper that had fallen out. When she bent down to pick it up, she saw that it was a death certificate. Even though she couldn't read very well, she recognized some words. Gabriel Medici Santos, 7 years old. Accident. The girl's heart raced. Oswaldo had lost a son. At that moment she heard footsteps in the living room and quickly put the paper back in the drawer, getting off the chair. Mirella had woken up and was looking for her. "Remia, where are you, honey?" "I'm here, Mrs. Mirella," she replied, coming out of the office. Mirella found her in the hallway, her eyes still a little confused from sleep. "Sorry, sometimes I get sleepy. Were you all right alone?" "Yes, I was. Can you tell me about the boy in the photographs?" Mirella's face contorted with pain, and for a moment a strange clarity took over her eyes. "Gabriel," she whispered, "my boy, he's gone." "Like my mother?" asked Remia with the brutal innocence of children. "Yes, like your mother. But Gabriel was just a baby. He was only 7 years old." Mirella sat down heavily in an armchair. "It was in a car accident. Oswaldo was driving, raining a lot. A truck lost control." Remia approached and held Mirella's hand. "It must hurt a lot." "It hurts every day, and you know what's worse? I forget. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and go to call Gabriel for breakfast because my head forgets that he's not here anymore. Then I remember, and it's like he dies again. Tears streamed down Mirella's face, but there was a lucidity in her voice that Remia hadn't seen before. And your Oswaldo. Oswaldo blames himself. He thinks he should have driven slower, been more careful. He distanced himself from me after the accident, not out of anger, but out of pain. It's like he can't look at me anymore without remembering Gabriel. Remia processed this information with the seriousness of someone much older. That's why he was sad when I showed up. No, honey, I think you brought something different to him. You reminded him that he can still take care of someone. He can still protect a child. But your mother doesn't like me. My mother? Mirella sighed. Theodora has always been very controlling. After Gabriel died and my illness started, she got even worse. She thinks she can decide everything for me. Do you let her? Sometimes I have no choice. When my head gets confused, she makes the decisions for me, and she controls a lot of our money. At that moment they heard the sound of cars arriving in the driveway. Loud, tense voices echoed from outside. They're back, said Mirella, and instantly her expression became worried, and they seemed to be arguing. Remia ran to the window and saw Oswaldo getting out of a car, followed by Fabrizio, Gonzales, and an elderly woman of severe appearance who could only be Theodora. Everyone was talking at the same time, and the atmosphere was clearly tense. Mrs. Mirella, said Remia quickly, is your husband a good man? He's the best man I know, replied Mirella without hesitation. Why do you ask? Because I think he's going to need help to face your mother. Mirella looked at the girl in surprise. You're very smart for only being 4 years old. Life on the street teaches you to grow up fast. The front door opened forcefully, and the voices became clearer. Theodora was attacking Oswaldo verbally, Fabrizio seemed desperate, and Gonzales mumbled apologies. Mirella! Shouted Theodora as she entered the living room. Where is that girl? I'm here, said Remia, coming out from behind the armchair where she had instinctively hidden. Theodora looked at her with contempt. Pack your things. You're leaving this house right now. Mom! Protested Mirella, a sudden firmness appearing in her voice. Remia stays. You're not in a position to make that decision, said Theodora coldly. Yes, I am, retorted Mirella, standing up. And as the owner of this house, I say she stays. Oswaldo watched the scene in surprise. He hadn't seen Mirella so lucid and determined in months. Mirella, you don't even remember who this child is, insisted Theodora. Yes, I do, said Mirella with conviction. She's Remia. I taught her to write her own name when she lived at the St. Francis shelter. She likes to draw birds and always asked if one day she would have a real family. Everyone fell silent. Mirella's specific and detailed memory was impressive considering her condition. How do you remember that? Asked Theodora, suspicious. Because some memories are stronger than the illness, replied Mirella, and because this girl is special. She brought life back to this house. Fabrizio, who had observed the entire family argument, finally spoke up. Sorry to interrupt, but we still have the problem of my sister to solve. And we will solve it, said Oswaldo firmly. But first, some things need to be clear here at home. He turned to Theodora. Mrs. Santos, you're going to stop threatening Remia and Mirella. This is my house, my family, and my decisions. Your family? Laughed Theodora bitterly. You can barely take care of your sick wife, and you want to adopt a street child. Maybe that's exactly why I need to take care of her, replied Oswaldo. Maybe it's time to stop running from the responsibility of protecting the people I love. Remia watched the entire discussion, and suddenly she had an idea. I know where Celia might be, she said, her voice small but determined. Everyone turned to her. What do you mean? Asked Fabrizio. The lady who gave me food in the park. She always talked about a friend who lived near the ocean. She said that if she ever needed to run away from something, she would go there. Camden, muttered Fabrizio. I was right. But there's more, continued Remia. She talked about a man who was stalking her, who wouldn't leave her alone. An older man who worked with numbers. Gonzalez paled. I never stalked her. Maybe not you, said Oswaldo, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. But someone you know. And at that moment, everyone realized that the mystery of Celia's disappearance was much more complex and dangerous than they had imagined. Remia's revelation completely changed the atmosphere in the room. Fabrizio knelt down in front of the girl, his eyes shining with a hope that he hadn't felt in weeks. "Remia, are you sure that Celia was talking about Camden?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm despite his anxiety. "Yes, I'm sure," she replied with conviction. "She always said that if things ever got really bad here, she would go to her friend's house near the ocean. She talked about a beach where she could think better." Gonzalez, who had remained silent in the corner of the room, shifted nervously. "If you think you're going to find anything in Camden, you're wasting your time," he muttered. "Why do you say that?" asked Oswaldo, carefully observing the accountant's reactions. Because she's not there anymore," said Gonzalez, avoiding everyone's gaze. Fabrizio stood up slowly, his hands trembling with contained anger. "How do you know she's not there anymore?" I received some calls. The suppliers who are involved in the scheme got nervous when they found out that she had fled to Camden. They brought her back." "Brought her back where?" asked Oswaldo, his voice dangerously low. "To a safe place. They're not going to hurt her. They're just going to keep her away until everything calms down." Theodora, who had observed the entire conversation with growing impatience, spoke up. "Oswaldo, do you see how dangerous this situation is getting? And you want to keep a child in the middle of this? The girl has helped us more in 5 minutes than we've managed in 3 weeks, retorted Oswaldo. "If it wasn't for her, we would still be in the dark." "Exactly my point," said Theodora coldly. "A 4-year-old child shouldn't be involved in criminal situations." Mirella, who had remained surprisingly lucid throughout the discussion, stood up and walked over to her mother. "Mom, you're wrong about Remia, and you're wrong about many other things too." "Mirella, you're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months," interrupted Mirella. "And one of the things I see clearly is that you're not trying to protect me. You're trying to control me." Theodora was visibly shaken by her daughter's sudden lucidity. "I just want what's best for you. What's best for me is to have people who love me around. And Rimia reminds me of good things. She makes me feel useful again." At that moment, the doorbell rang. Oswaldo went to answer it and found a woman of approximately 38 years old, black hair tied in a ponytail and discreet professional clothing. "Good morning," she said, showing a credential. "I'm Wilma Carvalho, a social worker. I received a report about a child in an irregular situation at this address." Oswaldo's blood ran cold. He looked over his shoulder and saw Theodora with an expression of malicious satisfaction on her face. "Who called you?" he asked. "A family member concerned about the well-being of the child and a person with a mental disability who is allegedly being influenced inappropriately." Oswaldo felt a fury growing in his chest. Theodora had carried out her threat. "Can I speak to the child in question?" asked Wilma, entering the house. Rimia, who had heard the conversation from the living room, appeared in the hallway. Upon seeing the social worker, her face paled. She knew that kind of visit well. It always ended with her being taken to places she didn't want to go. "Hi, honey," said Wilma with professional gentleness. "What's your name?" "Rimia," she replied in a low voice, instinctively moving closer to Mirella. "Rimia, how long have you been living here?" "Since this morning. And before that, where did you live?" Rimia hesitated. If she told the truth about living on the streets, she would be immediately taken away. "In several places," she said diplomatically. Wilma made notes on her clipboard. "And how did you meet these people?" "They helped me when I helped them." Rimia's simple and honest answer touched Wilma in an unexpected way. There was something about the girl that went beyond the typical child in a vulnerable situation. "Can you talk to me privately?" asked Wilma to Oswaldo and Mirella. The three headed to the kitchen, leaving Rimia in the living room with Fabrizio, Gonzalez, and Theodora. "Listen here, girl," said Theodora, as soon as they were alone. "You better tell the social worker that you don't feel safe here, that you want to go to a place appropriate for children like you." "I don't want to go anywhere," said Rimia firmly. "I want to stay with Mrs. Mirella and Mr. Oswaldo. You don't understand the situation. They can't take care of you properly." Fabrizio, who had observed the conversation, spoke up. "With all due respect, ma'am, the girl seems very well cared for and happy here." "You have no authority to comment on that," retorted Theodora. "Maybe not, but I have eyes to see, and I see a child who has found a family that loves her." In the kitchen, Wilma talked with Oswaldo and Mirella, trying to understand the situation. "Mr. Oswaldo, the report alleges that you are keeping a child without legal authorization and that Mrs. Mirella does not have the mental capacity to consent to this situation." "The report is partially correct," admitted Oswaldo. "Rimia has no legal documentation with us, but she is not being kept against her will. And as for Mirella—" "I can speak for myself," interrupted Mirella. "Wilma, can I call you that? I have a neurological problem that affects my recent memory, but my judgment is still clear, and my judgment tells me that Rimia needs us as much as we need her." Wilma observed Mirella carefully. She had worked with many people with cognitive disabilities, and she knew how to recognize when someone was genuinely compromised versus momentarily lucid. "Mrs. Mirella, do you remember how you met Rimia?" "Perfectly. I was a teacher at the St. Francis shelter a few years ago. Rimia was one of the most special children I've ever met, intelligent, brave, but also vulnerable." "And how did you meet again?" Oswaldo told the story of the airport, omitting the most dangerous details, but emphasizing Rimia's courage and kindness. "That's a very unusual story," commented Wilma. "But it's true," said Mirella, "and I can prove that I've known Rimia for a long time." Mirella went to a kitchen cabinet and pulled out a small box. Inside, there were several photographs of the shelter, including some where Rimia appeared much smaller, always next to Mirella. "I kept photos of all the special children who passed through the shelter," explained Mirella. "Rimia was always one of them." Wilma examined the photographs, impressed. The connection between Mirella and Rimia was clearly genuine and long-lasting. "Even so," she said, "I need to follow protocols. Rimia needs official monitoring, and you need to initiate legal processes if you want to have permanent responsibility for her." "We are willing to do that," said Oswaldo immediately. "But there are complications," continued Wilma. "The person who made the report has legal rights as a family member of Mrs. Mirella and can contest any decision you make." At that moment, screams coming from the living room interrupted the conversation. They ran to see what was happening and found a chaotic scene. Theodora was physically trying to drag Rimia out of the house while the girl clung to the sofa, screaming. Fabrizio was trying to intervene, but Theodora was threatening him with legal action. "Let go of the girl," shouted Oswaldo. "She's leaving this house right now," responded Theodora, pulling Rimia harder. It was then that Mirella did something that surprised everyone. With a strength that no one expected from her, she placed herself between her mother and Rimia. "Mom, stop, now!" "Mirella, get out of the way." "No. For years I've let you control my life, make decisions for me, treat me as if I were incapable. But that ends today." "You're not well, daughter." "I'm well enough to know that I'm not going to let you hurt an innocent child." Wilma observed the entire scene with growing understanding. The family dynamics were much more complex than the initial report suggested. "Mrs. Santos," she said with authority, "I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the child. Any decision about Rimia's future will be made through the appropriate channels. I'm the legal grandmother. I have rights." "You are not Rimia's legal grandmother," corrected Wilma. "And you are demonstrating inappropriate behavior in the presence of a minor." Theodora finally released Rimia, but her look promised that that battle was far from over. "This is not going to stay like this," she said, heading towards the door. "I'm going to use all available legal resources." After she left, a tense silence took over the room. Remia was trembling, clinging to Mirella, while everyone processed what had just happened. "Well," said Wilma finally, "I think I now understand the real situation here better." Wilma remained in the house for another hour, carefully observing the interactions between Remia, Mirella, and Oswaldo. What she saw impressed her deeply. A child who clearly felt safe and loved, a woman who, despite her limitations, demonstrated extraordinary maternal capacity, and a man who had found a new purpose in protecting those two special people. "Mr. Oswaldo," she said finally, "I'm going to be frank with you. Remia's situation is complex, but I see no signs of neglect or danger here. In fact, I see the opposite." "Does that mean she can stay?" asked Mirella, holding Remia's hand. "Temporarily, yes, but you need to initiate the legal processes immediately, and I'm going to monitor the situation closely, not as supervision, but as support." Remia looked at Wilma curiously. "You're not going to take me away?" "No, honey. My job is to ensure that children are safe and happy, and you clearly are both here." Fabrizio, who had observed the entire family interaction with growing patience, finally spoke up. "Sorry, but we still have the problem of my sister. Gonzalez said that she was brought back from Camden." Oswaldo turned to the accountant, who had tried to make himself invisible during the confusion with Theodora. "Gonzalez, you're going to tell us exactly where Celia is." "Now, I already said that I don't know the exact location," he protested. "I just know that the suppliers have a scheme to keep people quiet when necessary." "What suppliers?" insisted Fabrizio. Gonzalez sighed, defeated. "Mainly Tony Veloso, from Veloso Construction Materials. He was making a lot of money with the overbilling. When Celia discovered the scheme, he panicked." "And where would this Tony Veloso keep someone hidden?" asked Oswaldo. "He has rural properties on the outskirts of the city, isolated places where he can resolve problems discreetly." Wilma frowned. "Are you talking about kidnapping?" "It's not exactly kidnapping," said Gonzalez quickly. "It's more like forced protection. They don't hurt anyone, they just keep the person away until the situation is resolved." "That's kidnapping," said Wilma categorically. "And you need to involve the authorities." "No!" exclaimed Fabrizio. "If we involve the police now, they might hurt Celia. I need to try to rescue her first." Oswaldo agreed. "Wilma, I understand your concern, but we have to try a more discreet approach first." "I can't officially support that," said Wilma, "but I also can't stop you from looking for a missing person." It was then that Remia had an idea. "Can I see a picture of Celia?" she asked Fabrizio. "Sure," he said, taking a photograph from his wallet. "Why?" Remia studied the image carefully, and suddenly her eyes widened. "I know her. She's the lady who gave me food in the park." "We already know that," said Fabrizio gently. "No, you don't understand," insisted Remia. "I saw her a few days ago." Everyone turned to her immediately. "What do you mean?" asked Oswaldo. "2 days ago, I was looking for food near the downtown market when I saw a car stopped. She was in the back window trying to get attention. She saw me and made gestures to me, but the car drove away before I could get close." "Are you sure it was her?" asked Fabrizio, his voice tense with hope. "I'm sure. She was wearing a blue blouse and her hair was tied up. And she was doing this with her hand." Remia imitated a gesture of distress. Gonzalez paled. "If she was being transported 2 days ago, it means they moved her." "To where?" asked Oswaldo. "Probably to one of Veloso's warehouses. They have 3 properties where they usually keep things." Fabrizio stood up abruptly. "Then let's search all 3 places." "Wait," said Wilma. "This is dangerous. If these people are involved in crimes, you could get hurt." "My sister could get hurt if I do nothing," retorted Fabrizio. Oswaldo made a decision. "Wilma, can you stay here with Mirella and Remia?" Fabrizio and I will check those properties. I'm going too, said Remia immediately. Absolutely not, said Oswaldo. It's too dangerous. But I can help. I recognize the car I saw her in, and I know many places in the city that you don't know. Mirella spoke up. Remia is right. She knows the city in a way that's different from you. And if Celia trusts her, maybe it's important that she's there. Mirella, she's a child, protested Oswaldo. A child who saved your life this morning, reminded Mirella, and who has more courage than many adults. Wilma observed the discussion with interest. If you take Remia, I'm going too. I can't leave a minor in a risky situation without supervision. That's not a good idea, said Oswaldo. It's the only way I'll allow her to go, said Wilma firmly. Gonzales, seeing that he would be forced to accompany the group, tried one last escape. Look, I've already told you everything I know. You don't need me to search the properties. Yes, we do, said Fabrizio. You're going to take us exactly where they are. What if Tony Veloso finds out that I helped you? Then you should have thought about that before getting involved in crime, said Oswaldo dryly. Mirella approached Remia. My dear, are you sure you want to go? It could be dangerous. I'm sure. Mrs. Celia was good to me when I needed it. Now it's my turn to help her. All right, said Mirella, hugging the girl, but promise you'll be careful. I promise. Oswaldo was still hesitant. The idea of taking Remia into a potentially dangerous situation went against all the protective instincts that had awakened that day. Oswaldo, said Mirella, holding his hand, trust her, trust yourselves, and bring Celia back. An hour later, a small convoy left the house. Oswaldo driving his car with Remia and Wilma, followed by Fabrizio driving a borrowed car with Gonzales hitchhiking. The accountant had provided the addresses of Tony Veloso's 3 rural properties, all located in isolated areas on the outskirts of Atlantic City. The first property is about 12 miles from here, explained Oswaldo to his passengers. It's an abandoned construction materials warehouse. How are we going to know if she's there? Asked Remia. We'll observe first, said Wilma. If there are signs of activity, or if you recognize the car you saw, then we decide what to do. During the trip, Remia watched the landscape change from urban to rural. Green fields stretched on both sides of the road, dotted with small houses and farms. For a girl who had spent her entire life in the city, that scenario was new and a little scary. Mr. Oswaldo, she said after a while, why did you want to help me? Oswaldo thought about the question for a moment. Because when I saw you save my life, I realized that there was still goodness in the world, and because it had been a long time since I felt that I could protect someone. Because of Gabriel? Oswaldo almost lost control of the car. How do you know about Gabriel? I saw the photographs in your house, admitted Remia, and Mrs. Mirella told me a little. Wilma observed the conversation with interest, realizing the complex emotional layers of the situation. Gabriel was my son, said Oswaldo with difficulty. He died in an accident when he was 7 years old. I was driving. Was it your fault? Asked Remia with the brutal frankness of children. I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Mrs. Mirella doesn't think it was. How do you know? Because when she spoke of him, she said it was an accident, that sometimes bad things happen without it being anyone's fault. Oswaldo felt tears forming in his eyes. Remia, you are a very special girl. You're special too. That's why I wanted to help you. At that moment, they arrived at the first property. It was a fenced lot with a large shed and several containers scattered around. It seemed abandoned, but Remia immediately pointed out something that the adults hadn't noticed. Look there, she said. There's a car hidden behind that container, and it was exactly the same car she had seen 2 days before, with Celia trying to ask for help from the back window. Fabrizio's heart raced when he saw the car that Remia had pointed out. It was a black sedan, half hidden behind a rusty container, exactly as the girl had described. He parked quickly and joined Oswaldo's group. Is that the car? he asked Remia, trying to control the anxiety in his voice. Yes, it is, she confirmed. I remember the license plate. It has numbers equal to my age, 4 to 4. Wilma observed the property with professional eyes. The place seemed abandoned at first glance, but there were subtle signs of recent activity. Footprints in the dirt, some empty food cans near one of the containers, and mainly a makeshift power line connecting the main shed to the electrical grid. Someone is definitely using this place, she murmured. Gonzalez was visibly nervous, constantly looking around as if he expected Tony Veloso to appear at any moment. You don't understand how dangerous these people are, he whispered. If they catch us here, then we better be quick, said Oswaldo. Fabrizio, let's approach the shed. Wilma, you stay here with Remia and Gonzalez. I want to go too, protested Remia. It's too dangerous, said Wilma firmly. You've already helped us a lot by recognizing the car. But what if Celia is scared? She knows me, she can trust me. Fabrizio hesitated. There was logic in Remia's argument, but the idea of taking a child into a potentially dangerous situation terrified him. It was Oswaldo who made the decision. Remia will stay with Wilma, but close enough so we can call her if Celia needs reassurance. The group carefully approached the shed. The corrugated metal walls had several cracks, allowing them to peek inside. What they saw left them outraged and relieved at the same time. Celia Santana was sitting on a plastic chair in the center of the shed, her hands tied with ropes, but apparently unharmed. She looked tired and scared, but not injured. Next to her, a stocky middle-aged man was dozing in a chair, clearly on guard duty. It's her, whispered Fabrizio, tears of relief running down his face. And there's only one guard, observed Oswaldo. That makes things easier. How are we going to get in? Asked Wilma. Oswaldo studied the shed. There was a main door in the front, but it was locked with a large padlock. On the side, however, there was a small window that seemed to be only ajar. Fabrizio, can you fit through that window? I can, but what about the guard? I'll create a distraction at the front door. When he gets up to see what's going on, you go in through the window. The plan was simple but risky. Oswaldo walked to the main door and started making noise, pretending to be someone trying to break the padlock. As expected, the guard woke up startled and headed to the door, leaving Celia alone for a few moments. Fabrizio took the opportunity and slipped through the side window. In seconds, he had cut the ropes that held his sister and was helping her up. Fabrizio, whispered Celia, barely believing what she saw. How did you find me? I'll explain later, he said quickly. Now we need to get out of here. But as they headed towards the window, the guard returned and saw them. Hey, what are you doing here? Running! Shouted Fabrizio, pushing Celia towards the window. The guard advanced towards them, but Oswaldo had anticipated this possibility. He kicked the door forcefully, causing the padlock to break and entering the shed. You're under arrest for kidnapping, he shouted to the guard. Kidnapping? I was just taking care of the girl for the boss, protested the man, clearly confused. Who is your boss? Asked Oswaldo. Tony Veloso, of course. He said that the lady was causing trouble and needed to be kept quiet for a few days. Meanwhile, Celia and Fabrizio managed to get out through the window and reunite with Wilma, Remia, and Gonzalez. The young woman was visibly shaken, but she seemed physically well. Celia! Exclaimed Remia, running to hug the woman who had been kind to her in the park. Remia! What are you doing here? Asked Celia, surprised but clearly happy to see the girl. I helped find you, said Remia proudly. Oswaldo came out of the shed a few minutes later, holding some papers he had found. The guard ran away, he said, but I found some interesting things. What kind of things? Asked Wilma. Documents showing that the scheme is much bigger than we imagined. It's not just the school project, it's several public works over the last few years. Celia, still recovering from the shock, spoke up. It's true. When I started investigating the school's numbers, I discovered that the pattern was repeated in other constructions, daycare centers, health clinics, even renovations at City Hall. And you told this to someone besides Gonzales? Asked Fabrizio. I told... Celia hesitated, looking nervously at Gonzales. Who? Insisted Oswaldo. To someone I trusted, someone I thought could help me expose everything in the right way. Who? Asked Wilma. Celia took a deep breath. To the deputy mayor of the city. I thought that as the person responsible for overseeing public works, he would want to know about the irregularities. A heavy silence fell over the group. Gonzales turned even paler. Celia, said Oswaldo slowly, what exactly did the deputy mayor say when you told him about the scheme? He was very interested. He asked me to gather all the evidence I had and take it to him. He said he was going to investigate personally. And you took the evidence? I took it. I handed everything over to him on a Friday afternoon. The following Sunday, men showed up at my house, saying that I had to go with them to clarify some misunderstandings. Fabrizio and Oswaldo exchanged glances, understanding the situation. The deputy mayor was involved in the scheme, said Fabrizio. Not only involved, said Gonzales finally, his voice coming out as a defeated whisper. He was the head of everything. Tony Veloso and the other suppliers only did what he ordered. How do you know this? Asked Oswaldo. Because he approached me personally when he found out that Celia was investigating. He offered me a lot of money to falsify documents and threatened my family's lives if I didn't cooperate. Remia, who had heard the entire conversation attentively, asked a question that caught everyone by surprise. If this man controls everything, why do you think he's going to let us leave like this? Before anyone could answer, they heard the sound of cars approaching. Several vehicles were coming towards the property, raising a cloud of dust on the dirt road. Crap, murmured Wilma. I think we've been discovered. We have to get out of here now, said Oswaldo, running towards the cars. Wait, said Celia, holding her brother-in-law's arm. There's something else you need to know. What? Before they brought me here, I overheard a conversation. The deputy mayor isn't just stealing money from the works. He's planning to sell information about future bids to businessmen from outside the city. What does that mean? Asked Fabrizio. It means he's going to destroy all the local companies, including your construction company, Oswaldo. You're considered a threat because you know the real costs of the works too well. The sound of the cars was getting closer. Oswaldo made a quick decision. Everyone in the cars, now. We're going back to the city and deciding what to do. What if they follow us? Asked Remia. Then we're going to have to be smarter than them, replied Oswaldo, starting the engine. As they fled the rural property, none of them noticed that one of the cars that was approaching did not belong to the deputy mayor's men. It was an official car, with people who were also interested in discovering the truth about the corruption scheme in the city. But that discovery would only come later, when they were already facing consequences that none of them had foreseen. The trip back to the city was tense and silent. Oswaldo drove, constantly checking the rearview mirror, while Fabrizio followed behind with Celia and Gonzales. Remia was sitting between Oswaldo and Wilma, her large eyes watching the landscape that quickly passed by the window. Mr. Oswaldo, she said after a few minutes, are the bad men going to try to hurt us? I'm not going to let that happen, he replied firmly, although his own confidence was shaken. The revelation that the deputy mayor was behind everything completely changed the situation. They weren't just dealing with common criminals, but with people in positions of power who could use official authority against them. We need to think of a plan, said Wilma. If the deputy mayor is really involved, you could be in real danger. What do you suggest? Asked Oswaldo. Document everything, gather all the evidence we have, and hand it over to the federal authorities. Skip the local chain of command. And in the meantime, we wait for nothing to happen to us. It's risky, but it's the safest way to ensure that the truth comes to light. When they arrived at Oswaldo's house, they found a surprise that left them even more worried. There were 2 cars parked in front. one that Oswaldo recognized as Theodora's and another unknown with official license plates. "This is not good," murmured Wilma. Inside the house, they found Mirella sitting nervously in the living room, accompanied by Theodora and two men in suits who were clearly authorities of some kind. "Oswaldo!" exclaimed Mirella, standing up quickly. "Thank God you're back. These men are asking questions about you." One of the men stood up and showed a credential. "I'm Federal Investigator Ricardo Nunes, and this is my partner, Investigator Silva. We're investigating a corruption scheme in municipal public works." Oswaldo felt a relief mixed with apprehension. "Federal investigators? How did you know about the case?" "We received an anonymous report a few weeks ago about irregularities at Medici Construction. During our investigation, we discovered that the problem was much bigger than we imagined." Celia spoke up. "Gentlemen, I can clarify some things. I was an employee of the construction company and discovered the irregularities." "Are you Celia Santana?" asked Investigator Silva. "I am. We were looking for you. We heard that she had disappeared after discovering important evidence." Fabrizio quickly explained about the rescue they had just carried out, while Gonzalez became increasingly nervous in the corner of the room. "Interesting," said Investigator Nunes. "This confirms some of our suspicions. Mr. Gonzalez Pereira is also on our list of people to interrogate." Gonzalez swallowed hard. I cooperated with everything. I told them the truth." "And now you're going to tell us," said Silva firmly. It was then that Theodora spoke up, her voice filled with an authority that surprised everyone. "Investigator Nunes, as we discussed earlier, my main concern is the well-being of my daughter and the child who is being kept here irregularly." Remia looked at the older woman with confusion. "How did you talk before?" Investigator Nunes addressed Theodora. "Mrs. Santos, as we explained, our investigation takes priority over family matters." "Certainly," said Theodora with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But I hope you understand that a child shouldn't be exposed to criminal situations." Wilma spoke up. "Excuse me, but who exactly are you in this situation?" Theodora straightened up, assuming an even more authoritative posture. "I'm Theodora Santos, mother of Mrs. Mirella, and also a licensed councilwoman of this city for 15 years. The silence that followed was revealing. No one knew that Theodora had official political connections. "Councilwoman?" repeated Oswaldo, incredulous. "Temporarily licensed to take care of my sick daughter," explained Theodora, "but I still maintain important contacts in the municipal administration." A terrible understanding began to form in Oswaldo's mind. "You were the one who made the anonymous report about my company, weren't you?" "I did what I thought was necessary to protect my family," responded Theodora without denying it. "Mom!" exclaimed Mirella, horrified. "You couldn't do that to Oswaldo." "I could, and I did. His company was being used for crimes, Oswaldo. It was my civic duty to report it." "But you knew that I wasn't directly involved," he protested. "I knew. But I also knew that a federal investigation would be the best way to remove unwanted influences from our family." Remia, who had observed the entire discussion with growing understanding, asked a question that surprised everyone. "Do you want me to leave because you know that I make Mrs. Mirella happier?" Theodora looked at the girl coldly. "A child like you doesn't belong in a family like ours." "What kind of family is ours?" asked Mirella, a growing indignation in her voice. "A respectable family, with social standing, with responsibilities to the community." "A cold and controlling family, you mean," retorted Mirella. "Mom, you've spent years telling me that it was for my own good, but now I see that it was always for your own good." Investigator Nunes interrupted the family discussion. "Ladies, you can resolve this later. Now we need to focus on the criminal investigation." "Of course," said Theodora, regaining her composure. "And as a stakeholder in the safety of the community, I would like to know what measures will be taken against the deputy mayor." Everyone turned to her. How did she know about the deputy mayor's involvement? Mrs. Santos, said Investigator Silva slowly. How did you know about the deputy mayor? I have contacts in the municipal administration. When I heard that an investigation was underway, I asked some discreet questions. Oswaldo felt a suspicion growing in his mind. Theodora, do you know the deputy mayor personally? I know many people from the municipal administration. It's natural for someone with my political experience. That doesn't answer my question. Theodora hesitated for the first time since they had arrived. Yes, I know him. We've worked together on several projects over the years. What kind of projects? Asked Investigator Nunes, clearly interested. Urban development projects mainly. The deputy mayor has always been very interested in the city's economic growth. Celia, who had remained quiet during the discussion, spoke up. Excuse me, but can I ask a question? Mrs. Santos, do you have companies registered in your name? I have some small investments, nothing significant. What kind of investments? Theodora began to look uncomfortable. Some shares in local companies, including construction companies, insisted Celia. Investigator Silva looked at his file and pulled out some documents. In fact, our investigation revealed that Mrs. Theodora Santos has a stake in several companies that have won municipal bids in recent years. The revelation fell like a bomb in the room. Mirella looked at her mother with growing horror. Mom, what does this mean? It means, said Investigator Nunes, that your mother may have been on the receiving end of the corruption scheme we're investigating. That's absurd, protested Theodora. My investments are legitimate. Maybe, said Silva, but the timing of the stock purchases and the values of the bids won by these companies create an interesting pattern. Oswaldo stood up, his anger finally exploding. So that's why you wanted to keep me away from Mirella. It wasn't to protect her, it was to protect yourself. You don't understand the complexities. I understand perfectly, he shouted. You were making money from the same scheme that was destroying my company. Remia, who had observed everything in silence, approached Mirella and held her hand. Mrs. Mirella, you didn't know anything about this, did you? No, my dear, replied Mirella, tears running down her face. I didn't know anything. Then we don't need to worry. Because you're good, and good people always end up well in the end. Remia's innocence and faith brought a moment of calm to the chaotic room, but everyone knew that the problems were only just beginning. Investigator Nunes closed his file. Mrs. Theodora Santos, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us to give a formal statement. This is totally unnecessary, she protested. Unfortunately, it's not optional. As Theodora was escorted out of the house, Mirella collapsed on the sofa, the weight of the revelations finally hitting her. Oswaldo sat down next to her, and Remia climbed onto both of their laps, creating a comforting hug that everyone needed. What's going to happen now? Asked Mirella. Now, said Wilma, you're going to need to rebuild your lives without the interference of those who shouldn't be controlling them. But none of them knew that Theodora's arrest would only be the beginning of a series of events that would further test the resilience of the family they had formed. The days that followed Theodora's arrest were an emotional roller coaster for the whole family. Mirella oscillated between moments of impressive clarity and periods of deep confusion, as if the shock of the revelations about her mother had further destabilized her neurological condition. I can't believe my own mother was involved in this, she said one morning while having coffee with Oswaldo and Remia. For years, she made me feel like I was incapable of making decisions, and all the time, she was making criminal decisions. Remia, who had become a constant and comforting presence beside Mirella, held her hand. Mrs. Mirella, sometimes the people we love do bad things, but that doesn't change who you are. How are you so wise for a 4-year-old girl? Asked Mirella, smiling for the first time in days. Life teaches, replied Remia simply. Oswaldo observed the interaction between the two with a mixture of love and concern. In recent weeks, Remia had become Mirella's emotional anchor, but he feared the weight of that responsibility on such a small child. "Remia," he said, "you don't need to take care of us, you know that, right?" "I know," she said, "but I like taking care. It's like you take care of me." At that moment, Wilma arrived for one of her regular follow-up visits. She had become more than just a social worker to the family. She was a friend and advisor who helped them navigate the legal complexities of the situation. "How are you all today?" she asked, sitting at the table. "Better," said Oswaldo. "Mirella had a quiet night." "And the legal processes, how are they going?" Oswaldo sighed. "Complicated. With Theodora in jail, a question has arisen about who has legal authority to make decisions about Mirella when she is in crisis." "What do you mean?" "Apparently Theodora had registered a power of attorney that gave her powers over Mirella's medical and financial decisions. With her in jail, the lawyers are questioning whether I have sufficient authority." Wilma frowned. "Does this affect Remia's situation?" "It may affect it. If they determine that our domestic situation is unstable, they may question our ability to care for her." Remia, who had heard the conversation, became visibly frightened. "Are you going to have to give me to another place?" "Never," said Mirella with surprising firmness. "You're our daughter now, and no one is going to take you away from us." "But what if the important people say that you can't stay with me?" Oswaldo knelt down in front of her. "Remia, we're going to fight for you with all our strength, but I need you to know that regardless of what happens, you'll always have our love." Tears began to stream down the girl's face. "I don't want to leave. This is my home." "And it always will be," promised Mirella, hugging her. Wilma observed the scene with emotion, but also with professional concern. "Oswaldo, can we talk in private for a moment?" They headed to the office, leaving Mirella and Remia in the kitchen. "The situation is more complicated than you're admitting, isn't it?" asked Wilma directly. Oswaldo sighed heavily. "Much more complicated. The lawyers told me that, with Theodora in jail and Mirella being considered incapable by some legal aspects, there is the possibility of a judge determining that our house is not a stable environment for Remia. And what can you do to prevent that? Prove that we are a functional and loving family. But with all the criminal investigation, the company's problems, and Mirella's condition, you're thinking of giving up." "Never," said Oswaldo vehemently, "but I'm realistic about the challenges we face." At that moment, Mirella appeared in the doorway of the office, her face pale and confused. "Oswaldo, who are these people in our house, and why is there a child here?" Oswaldo's heart broke. Mirella had entered into one of her episodes of confusion, temporarily forgetting about Remia and the current situation. "Mirella, honey, remember me? I'm your husband, Oswaldo." "Of course I remember you," she said, irritated, "but I don't remember agreeing to have a strange child in our house." Remia appeared behind Mirella, clearly hurt by the words. "Mrs. Mirella, it's me, Remia. Don't you remember?" "Who are you? Why are you calling me Mrs.?" "Mirella." Wilma observed the situation with growing concern. It was exactly this type of episode that could be used against the family in a legal assessment. "Mirella," said Oswaldo gently, "this is Remia. She's living with us because she needs a family, and we need her too." "I don't remember agreeing to this," repeated Mirella, seeming increasingly agitated. "I want her to leave my house." Remia began to cry silently, and Oswaldo found himself torn between consoling the girl and trying to calm Mirella. "Wilma," he said desperately, "what do I do?" "First, let's calm Mirella. Then we'll talk to Remia." It took almost an hour for Mirella to calm down and partially remember the situation. When she finally recognized Remia again, the girl was already visibly shaken. "My dear," said Mirella, hugging Remia, "I'm sorry. Sometimes my head gets confused and I forget the important things." "It's okay," said Remia, but her voice was small and sad. That afternoon, after Mirella had fallen asleep, Wilma had a serious conversation with Oswaldo and Remia. "We need to be honest about the situation," she said. "Episodes like today's can be used to question the stability of the home." "What does that mean?" asked Remia. "It means that some people may think that you would be better off in a family where the mother doesn't get confused sometimes." "But I like Mrs. Mirella even when she gets confused," protested Remia. "And when she remembers me, she gets very happy." "I know, honey, but the laws sometimes don't understand those things." Oswaldo spoke up. "Wilma, is there anything we can do to strengthen our legal position?" "Some things. Medical documentation showing that Mirella has consistent periods of lucidity, development reports from Remia showing that she is thriving here, and mainly what? Mainly, you need more financial and social stability. The criminal investigation has damaged Oswaldo's reputation, even though he is innocent. How can I fix that? Rebuilding, proving that you are an honest businessman who was a victim, not a criminal." That night, Remia couldn't sleep. She got out of bed and went to Oswaldo and Mirella's room, finding Oswaldo awake looking at the ceiling. "Can't you sleep either?" she asked. "No, I'm thinking too much." "Can I lie here with you?" "Of course." Remia snuggled between Oswaldo and Mirella, who was sleeping peacefully. "Mr. Oswaldo," she whispered, "if I leave, will Mrs. Mirella be sad?" "Very sad. We'll both be very sad." "Then I can't leave. I need to take care of her when her head gets confused." "Remia, you have no obligation to take care of us." "I know, but families take care of each other, right? And you're my family." Oswaldo felt tears forming in his eyes. "Yes, we're your family. Then we're going to find a way to stay together." "How are you so sure?" "Because when people truly love each other, they always find a way." The next morning, Oswaldo woke up with renewed determination. Remia was right. They were a family, and families fight for each other. But when he went to check his emails, he found a message that made his blood run cold. It was an official notification that a hearing had been scheduled to determine whether Remia should be removed from his home and placed in a family considered more stable. The fight for his family was just beginning, and he knew it wouldn't be easy. The week before the hearing was the most difficult that Oswaldo had ever faced. He divided his time between meetings with lawyers, medical appointments to document Mirella's condition, and attempts to maintain a semblance of normalcy for Remia, who was visibly anxious about the situation. "The hearing is in 3 days, said attorney Roberto Silva during a meeting at Oswaldo's office. "We've secured a few things in our favor. Medical reports showing that Mirella has periods of consistent lucidity, psychological evaluations of Remia demonstrating that she is developing well, and testimonies from Wilma and other professionals." "And against us?" asked Oswaldo. "The fact that you are still under federal investigation, even if as a witness. The financial instability caused by the temporary suspension of the company, and mainly Mirella's neurological condition. But she's better. Since Theodora is no longer interfering, she's been having more good days." "I know. But the other side will argue that her condition could worsen, and that a child shouldn't be in an environment of medical uncertainty." Oswaldo ran his hands over his face, exhausted. "Who is representing the other side? Who is trying to take Remia away from us?" "That's the strange thing," said Roberto, consulting his papers. "It's not a specific family wanting to adopt her. It's the state, arguing that she should be in a family considered more stable." "But who initiated this? Someone had to file the petition." "The petition was initiated by Theodora Santos, before she was arrested. Apparently she filed legal documents questioning your ability to care for Remia." The anger that Oswaldo felt was so intense that he had to get up and walk around the room. "Even in jail, she's still trying to destroy our family." "Actually," said Roberto carefully, "there's something else you need to know." "What?" "Theodora wasn't the only one to sign the petition. There's another name on the documents. Who? The deputy mayor. Before he was exposed in the scandal, he co-signed the petition as a municipal authority concerned about child welfare. Oswaldo was silent for a long moment, processing the information. They worked together to try to separate our family. It seems so, probably as a way to pressure you not to investigate the company's irregularities too deeply. But now that they've both been exposed, doesn't that nullify the petition? Unfortunately, no. The process was already underway, and the state has assumed responsibility for the child. That afternoon, Oswaldo returned home more discouraged than he had been in weeks. He found Remia and Mirella in the garden, planting flowers in small pots. "Look, Daddy Oswaldo," said Remia, using for the first time the term of endearment that she had been avoiding for fear of being presumptuous. "We're planting daisies." Oswaldo's heart clenched upon hearing her call him Daddy. "They're beautiful," he said, crouching down next to them. "Remia said that flowers make people happy when they're sad," commented Mirella. "So we planted several for you. You two always know how to make me happy," he said, hugging both of them. "How was the meeting with the lawyer?" asked Mirella. Oswaldo hesitated. Mirella was having one of her good days, completely lucid and present. But he didn't want to worry her unnecessarily. "It was good," he said, trying to sound optimistic. Remia studied him with her perceptive eyes. "It wasn't good, was it? Why do you think that? Because you're making the same face that I used to make when I was on the streets, and someone asked if I was okay." Remia's brutal honesty always surprised him. "You're right, it was a difficult meeting." "Are they going to try to take me away anyway?" she asked, her voice small. "They're going to try, but we're not going to let that happen easily." Mirella held Remia's hand. "My dear, regardless of what happens, I want you to know that these have been the happiest months of my life since Gabriel." She stopped, a flash of pain crossing her face. "Since Gabriel was gone," completed Oswaldo softly. "Yes," said Mirella. "You brought joy back to this house. You reminded us what it is to be a family." That night they received an unexpected visit. Fabrizio and Celia arrived together, carrying a folder full of documents. "We came to help," announced Fabrizio as soon as they entered. "How so?" asked Oswaldo. Celia spoke up. "We heard about the hearing, and we decided to testify in your favor." "That's very kind, but I don't know how it can help." "We can testify about your character," said Fabrizio, "about how Remia was instrumental in solving a criminal case, about how you risked your own lives to help me find my sister." "And there's more," added Celia, opening the folder. "During the time I spent in hiding, I overheard many conversations, including some about the real motivations behind the petition against you." "What kind of motivations?" "The deputy mayor and Theodora weren't just trying to protect the corruption scheme. They were planning to force you to sell the construction company to one of the suppliers involved in the scheme." Oswaldo sat down heavily. "What do you mean?" "They thought that with enough pressure, investigations, family problems, financial instability, you would end up selling the company for a very low price to one of their cronies. So this whole situation with Remia was... It was a form of emotional blackmail," completed Celia. "They knew that you would become attached to the girl, and they would use it against you." Mirella, who had heard everything in silence, stood up suddenly. "Where are these documents that prove this? Some I memorized when I overheard the conversations. Others what? Others may be in Theodora's personal files, but it would be necessary to have access to her house." "What kind of access?" asked Oswaldo. "Legal," said Wilma, who had arrived during the conversation. "With her arrest, the house is under legal supervision. But if there is evidence of additional crimes, we can get a search warrant," completed Roberto, who had arrived right after Wilma. "Did you all arrange to come here today?" asked Oswaldo, surprised. "Actually, yes," admitted Wilma. "We met earlier today to plan a defense strategy." "And what is the strategy?" to prove that the entire petition against you was based on criminal motives, not on genuine concern for Remia's well-being. Roberto opened his folder. If we can prove that Theodora and the deputy mayor orchestrated this as part of a larger extortion scheme, the petition will be automatically annulled. And how do we prove that in 2 days? Investigating Theodora's house tomorrow morning, and what? And praying that Mirella has one of her good days during the hearing. Because if she can testify clearly about her mother's controlling and manipulative behavior, that could change everything, completed Oswaldo. Remia, who had heard the entire conversation sitting quietly in the corner of the room, finally spoke up. "Can I say something?" "Of course, honey," said Mirella. "I don't care if Mrs. Theodora's house has important papers or not, and I don't care if people think you're the perfect family for me." "Why not?" asked Wilma. "Because I already know that you are, and I don't need a judge to tell me that." The silence that followed was charged with emotion. A 4-year-old girl had just expressed a truth that all the adults were struggling to articulate legally. "But unfortunately," said Roberto gently, "the judge needs to agree." "Then let's make him agree," said Mirella, with a sudden determination that surprised everyone. "Let's show this judge that a family isn't defined by perfection, but by love." And at that moment everyone knew that they would fight with all their strength for the chance to remain together, regardless of the obstacles that they would still face. The morning of the search at Theodora's house dawned grey and rainy, as if the weather reflected the tension that everyone felt. Oswaldo, Roberto, and the federal investigators gathered in front of the 2-story house where Theodora had lived alone since separating from her husband years ago. "Remember," said Investigator Núñez, "we're looking specifically for documents that prove conspiracy for extortion and blackmail." "And anything related to the petition against Remia," added Roberto. Mirella had insisted on staying home with Remia, who was visibly nervous about the proximity of the hearing. "Are you sure you want to stay?" Oswaldo had asked before leaving. "I am," replied Mirella firmly. "Remia needs me today, and I need to prove to myself that I can take care of her without help." Theodora's house was impeccably organized. Each object in its place, each piece of furniture polished to a shine. But there was something cold in the environment, an absence of human warmth that contrasted sharply with the welcoming home of Oswaldo and Mirella. "Where do we start?" asked Oswaldo. "With the office," said Investigator Silva. "Controlling people like Theodora usually keep detailed records of everything." Theodora's office was a testament to her obsessive personality for control. There were meticulously organized files, each folder labeled with military precision, but it was in a locked drawer of the desk that they found what they were looking for. "Here," said Roberto, examining a folder titled "Family Matters Mirella." "There's correspondence with lawyers, medical reports about Mirella that I didn't even know existed, and what?" asked Oswaldo. "And a detailed plan to obtain complete guardianship over Mirella using her neurological condition." Oswaldo felt nauseous as he read the documents. Theodora had consulted several lawyers about how to use her daughter's illness to gain total control over her decisions and finances. "Look at this," said Investigator Núñez, holding up another set of papers. "Correspondence between Theodora and the deputy mayor about future investment opportunities." "What kind of opportunities?" "Apparently, they were planning to buy your construction company for a fraction of the real value after you were forced to sell due to family and professional instability." "Sons of—" began Oswaldo, but controlled himself. "There's more," said Silva, finding a separate folder. "Here are drafts of various versions of the petition against Remia. Look at the dates. She started planning this weeks before Remia even entered your lives. How is that possible? She was waiting for an opportunity. Any child who entered Mirella's life would be used as ammunition against you." The calculated cruelty of the plan left everyone silent. Theodora hadn't acted out of concern for Mirella or Remia. She had orchestrated everything as part of a scheme to gain total control over the family and its assets. "Is this enough to nullify the petition?" asked Osvaldo. "It's enough for much more than that," said Nunes. "This proves conspiracy, attempted fraud, and abuse of legal power." Meanwhile, at home, Mirella was living one of the most important days of her life. Remia had woken up crying from a nightmare where she was taken away from the family, and Mirella had managed to console her and keep her calm throughout the morning. "Mrs. Mirella," said Remia as they had breakfast, "what if the judge doesn't like me?" "Impossible," replied Mirella with conviction. "Anyone who looks at you will see what we see, a brave, intelligent girl full of love. But what if he thinks that you can't take care of me?" Mirella stopped eating and looked directly into Remia's eyes. "Honey, I have a disease that sometimes makes my head get confused." "That's true, but you know what else is true?" "What?" "Since you came into our lives, I've had more good days than bad. You give me a reason to fight against the confusion, to strive to remember the important things. I do that." "Yes, you do. And today, in court, I'm going to tell that to the judge. I'm going to say that you don't need special care because of my condition. I get better because of you." Remia smiled for the first time in days. "Then we're going to win?" "I don't know," said Mirella honestly. "But I know that we're going to fight." At 2 in the afternoon, everyone gathered at the city courthouse. Osvaldo and Roberto arrived with a folder full of the evidence found at Theodora's house. Wilma brought updated reports on Remia's development. Fabrizio and Celia came as witnesses to the family's character. "How's Mirella?" asked Osvaldo, worried. "Lucid and determined," replied Wilma. "She spent the entire morning consoling Remia and preparing herself mentally for the testimony. And Remia? Nervous, but brave. She understands what's happening and wants to talk to the judge. I don't know if it's a good idea for a 4-year-old child to testify." "Actually," said Roberto, "it might be exactly what we need, if the judge can see directly how she feels about the family." The hearing was scheduled for 3 o'clock. As they entered the courtroom, Remia held tightly to Osvaldo and Mirella's hands, her large eyes observing everything with curiosity mixed with fear. The judge was a middle-aged man, grey hair, and a serious but not unkind expression. "This is the hearing to determine the placement of the minor Remia Santos," he said. "We will hear first the arguments of the state." The state's representative was a young and efficient woman who presented the standard arguments: the need for stability, the concern for Mirella's neurological condition, and the financial instability caused by the criminal investigation. "While we acknowledge that the applicants have good intentions," she concluded, "we believe that the child's best interest would be better served in a home with less uncertainty." Roberto stood up for the defense. "Your Honor, before we present our arguments, we would like to introduce evidence that has completely changed the context of this petition." He presented the documents found at Theodora's house, explaining in detail how the entire petition had been orchestrated as part of a criminal scheme. This evidence shows that the original petition was not motivated by genuine concern for the child's well-being, but by criminal motives of extortion and blackmail. The judge examined the documents carefully, his expression becoming more grave with each page. "This is very serious," he said, "but even if the original motivation was impure, we still need to determine what is best for the child now." "I agree completely," said Roberto. "And that is why we would like to present witnesses." Wilma testified about Remia's exceptional development since arriving in the family. Fabrizio and Celia spoke about the courage and character of both Remia and Osvaldo and Mirella. But it was when Mirella stood up to testify that the atmosphere in the room changed completely. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and firm, "I have a neurological condition that affects my memory. Some days are more difficult than others. But I want you to know that since Remia came into our lives, I have fought harder against this disease than ever before. How so, ma'am? Asked the judge. Because now I have an extra reason to remember, to be present, to be the best version of myself. Mirella looked at Remia, who was watching her with admiration. This girl is not a burden on our family. She is our salvation. And on the days when your condition manifests more severely, Remia helps me remember who I am. She's patient with me, gentle, understanding. She teaches me as much as I teach her. Finally, the judge addressed Remia. Young lady, would you like to tell me how you feel about living with Mr. Oswaldo and Mrs. Mirella? Remia stood up in the chair, her small feet dangling in the air. I feel at home, she said simply. They love me even when I do wrong things, and I love them even when Mrs. Mirella forgets my name sometimes. And how would you feel if you had to live with a different family? Very sad, she replied honestly, because this is my real family, not by papers, but by love. The judge was silent for a long moment, observing the family that had formed in such an unconventional way. I will consider all the arguments and evidence presented, he said finally. My decision will be communicated tomorrow morning. As they left the courtroom, no one knew what the verdict would be, but everyone knew that they had given their best in the fight for their family. The night before, the judge's decision was the longest that any of them had ever experienced. Remia slept between Oswaldo and Mirella, waking up several times during the early morning hours to make sure that they were still there. Each time, one of them would gently console her until she fell back asleep. Regardless of what happens, whispered Oswaldo to Mirella at 5 in the morning, when neither of them could sleep anymore, these months have been the best of my life since Gabriel. For me too, replied Mirella, stroking Remia's hair as she slept between them. She's given us back the ability to be a family. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Roberto called with a tense voice. The judge wants to see you in court at 10 o'clock. He's going to give the decision. The family got ready in silence. Remia chose the blue dress that Mirella had bought for her, the first new dress she had owned since leaving the shelter. Mirella took her medication and did memory exercises, determined to be as lucid as possible. Oswaldo wore his best suit, the same one he had worn at his wedding with Mirella. Are you ready? He asked when it was time to leave. We are, said Mirella, holding Remia's hand. Let's face this together, added Remia, her courage surprising the adults once again. When they arrived at the courthouse, they found an unexpected surprise. Wilma was at the entrance accompanied by a woman of approximately 45 years old, dark hair and gentle eyes that seemed familiar somehow. This is Marina Santos, said Wilma, seeming nervous. She arrived last night in the city. Who is Marina Santos? Asked Oswaldo. The woman stepped forward, looking directly at Remia with tears in her eyes. I am your aunt, honey, your mother's sister. The world seemed to stop for Remia. My aunt? Yes, I lived far away in Chicago, and I only recently learned that you were here in Atlantic City. I came as soon as I found out. Oswaldo felt his heart sink. After everything they had been through, after all the fighting, a biological relative of Remia had appeared to claim her. Did you come to take Remia away? Asked Mirella, her voice trembling. Marina looked at the woman who had clearly become a mother to her niece, and then at Oswaldo and Remia. I came to meet the family that has taken such good care of her, she said softly, and to thank you. Thank us? Repeated Oswaldo, confused. I learned about you through the federal investigators. They contacted me as part of the investigation into the corruption scheme. When they told me how you protected Remia, how you fought for her, Marina stopped, emotional. You gave my niece something that I could never give, a family that chose her out of love, not out of obligation. But you're her blood family, said Oswaldo. You have more right. Legal right, maybe, interrupted Marina, but true family is what you have built. I came here not to take Remia away, but to support her staying with you. Remia, who had observed the entire conversation in silence, approached Marina. You look like my mom. I do look like her, smiled Marina, crouching down. Your mom was my younger sister. She always talked about you with so much love. Why didn't you come to get me sooner? Because I didn't know where you were, honey. After your mom was gone, you disappeared from the system. I spent years looking. And now that you've found me, Marina looked into the girl's eyes. Now I see that you already have parents who love you, and that makes me happy, not sad. At that moment, Roberto appeared. It's time, he said. The judge is ready. The courtroom was more crowded than it had been the day before. In addition to the family and their supporters, there were journalists interested in the case that had exposed a municipal corruption scheme. The judge entered and everyone stood up. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked directly at Remia before beginning to speak. This case has presented unique challenges, he began. Rarely do we see situations where a petition to remove a child is so clearly tainted by criminal motives. The evidence presented yesterday conclusively shows that the original petition was part of an extortion and blackmail scheme. He paused, consulting his papers. However, my responsibility is not to punish the criminals. That will be done in other instances, but to determine what is best for the child in question. Oswaldo held his breath. I have carefully observed the relationship between Remia Santos and the applicants Oswaldo and Mirella Medici. I saw a child who clearly feels loved, safe, and happy. I saw a family that, despite its imperfections and challenges, offers what every child needs: unconditional love. The judge addressed Marina directly. Mrs. Santos, I understand that you are the child's biological aunt and have legal rights. Would you like to claim custody? Marina stood up. No, Your Honor. I would like to formally waive any claim of custody in favor of the Medici family. But I would ask for permission to maintain regular contact with my niece. And do the applicants agree to this? Oswaldo stood up. We agree completely. Remia should know her origins and have a relationship with her biological family. The judge nodded approvingly. Very well. Considering all the factors presented, and especially the child's best interest, I determine that. The room fell into absolute silence. First, the original petition is annulled due to proven criminal motives. Second, Remia Santos will remain under the custody of Oswaldo and Mirella Medici. Third, I authorize the immediate start of the formal adoption processes. The explosion of joy in the room was immediate. Remia shouted with happiness and threw herself into Oswaldo and Mirella's arms. Fabrizio and Celia applauded. Wilma cried with emotion. Marina smiled with genuine happiness. And fourth, continued the judge with a rare smile, I determine that this extraordinary family serves as an example that love can overcome any adversity. In the months that followed, many things changed in Atlantic City. The deputy mayor and his accomplices were convicted of corruption. Theodora received a lesser sentence due to cooperation with the authorities, but lost any legal rights over Mirella's decisions. Oswaldo's construction company was completely exonerated and received new contracts to rebuild the works that had been damaged by the previous scheme. Gonzalez fully cooperated with the investigations and received a second chance, working honestly for the company. Fabrizio and Celia got married at the end of the year in a simple ceremony where Remia was the flower girl. The pilot started an air tourism business, while Celia opened her own accounting firm, specializing in transparency for public contracts. Marina visited Remia once a month, always bringing stories about the girl's mother and photos of the family that she had never known. Gradually, Remia built a loving relationship with her aunt, which perfectly complemented her adoptive family. Mirella had ups and downs with her condition, but the good days became more frequent. With the support of new treatments and mainly with the emotional stability brought by Remia, she managed to return to work part-time as an educational consultant. Wilma became a close friend of the family, always present at important celebrations and serving as a bridge between them and the legal system when necessary. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, exactly 1 year after the rescue at the airport, the family gathered in the garden of the Yellow House to celebrate Remia's 5th birthday. "Make a wish," said Mirella, holding the cake with 5 lit candles. Remia closed her eyes, thought for a moment, and then blew out the candles all at once. "What did you wish for?" asked Oswaldo. "That we be happy forever," she replied simply. "That's a wish that has already come true," said Mirella, hugging her daughter with all her heart. That night, after Remia fell asleep, Oswaldo and Mirella sat on the porch, watching the stars over Atlantic City. "Do you regret anything?" asked Mirella. "What?" "All the confusion, all the suffering that we went through to get here." Oswaldo thought about the question, remembering the morning at the airport when a 4-year-old girl had saved his life and changed his destiny forever. "I don't regret anything," he said finally, "because all of that brought us her, and she brought us back to life. She taught us that family isn't about perfection," agreed Mirella. "It's about choosing to love even when it's difficult." From Remia's room, a soft sound arrived. She was humming quietly the same song that her biological mother used to sing to her at the shelter. But now it wasn't a song of longing or loneliness. It was a song of gratitude, of joy, of a child who had finally found her place in the world. And so, in a yellow house, surrounded by flowered gardens in the city of Atlantic City, a family formed by the most improbable circumstances continued writing their love story, one happy page at a time. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities and challenges, but they would face everything together, as a true family always does. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.